unmute.
People can hear through your mic. Thank you.
Okay, so the purpose of this work session is a budget review of the 2021 municipal budget. No legal action is going to be taken tonight. So at this point, what I'm going to do is turn the presentation over to our CFO, Jim Kraft, and we're going to work through the slides, and this is council's opportunity to become familiar with the budget and ask any questions, clarifications, concerns that you may have. So with that, Jim, please begin.
Okay, yes, and please stop me as I go along.
Okay, I'll let you know if we get ahead of ourselves. Right now, you're good. The folks at home on Zoom can see this clearly.
Okay. This year's budget is up $1,328,220 from last year's amended budget. I stressed the word amended there because last year's budget had a $335,000 amendment for the lifeguard salaries, and you'll see that number come into play a couple times during this presentation. This budget also has an increase in the tax levy of $2 million, up from 13 million to 15 million, and it has an increase in the tax rate of 3.6 cents.
Question,
Yes.
why is the tax levy going up $2 million and the budget is only going up $1.3 million?
Okay, I will explain that in these slides coming up. You'll see, and then if I don't explain it clear enough, let me know, and we'll go back to it.
Okay.
But see the next slide. This next slide is the snapshot of the current expenditures and just the different budget categories we're going to go over in more detail, starting with salaries and wages. Salaries and wages increased $725,000 over last year's budget, and the three biggest increases are the fire department for $425,000, Public Works $267,000, almost $268,000, lifeguards and beach taggers up $65,000 over last year's amended budget. The next,
I just
yeah, sure, yeah,
interrupt again. I think it's important to note that within the salaries budget, the fire department increase of $425,000 does not take into account what we spent last year on compensation for the fire department. And that I grant you that the salary number is correct at 425,
right.
but it should be put into perspective with what we spent last year on the compensation to the fire department. Because just saying $425,000 gets all sorts of attention in my mind.
Okay. I think in the later slide, we do kind of break it out a little bit more, but right, for this slide, we're just strictly looking at the salary line.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to give an overview, then get into the details, correct?
Yes. Yeah, but yes, exactly.
Okay. And just one other thing, we need to make sure, because the folks at home can't hear, so you have to talk into the mic. Anybody that's talking into the microphone, make sure you talk into the mic so they can hear you at home. Right now, the audio at home is very low, which means it's also going to be very low on the recording.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt. But I would assume that, like Frank is saying, that the $425,000 increase as a result of now having paid firefighters is something that you will have an opportunity to discuss when we get to the public safety part of the presentation. You'll have plenty of time to make that known and to remind folks of what we're doing differently.
Got it.
Okay. So the next budget categories I want to draw attention to is debt and capital. I combined those two items together because together they both total the same as 2020, $6.162 million. This budget includes, as in last year, reserve for Back Bay dredge management of $345,000, the reserve for beach replenishment of $345,000. It also includes cash for recurrent capital items of $716,000, the down payment on capital projects of $400,000, and the funding of prior capital of $346,650. The funding of prior capital is, in the New Jersey budget, is treated as debt service, and that's and the objective there is to keep it at the same as last year, so it's not one of the factors that are influencing the tax rate.
Jim, can you just explain to me in layman's terms then what the cash for the recurring capital items are? What does that entail?
Okay. In this in the 2021 budget, there are,
You don't have to break it down, I'm just,
okay.
give me,
So
what are we,
what we did is we identified certain capital projects, like maybe a vehicle or meters and stuff, that we're paying cash for instead of included in a bond ordinance. They usually appear in every year's budget, and the idea there is to reduce future debt service by not having this in a bond ordinance.
okay, so, but how, okay, so
Even though
So
technically-
recurring, I guess, is what's throwing me off.
Right, they're capital, but they're treated as recurring because we pay for them rather than finance.
So what's
Yeah.
the difference between capital items and capital project? Just give me a definition.
What capital,
You have capital items there of 716, right?
yes.
And then the next line, you have the down payment, which I get on capital projects. So what's,
So the down payment on capital projects represents the statutory requirement of 5% down on a capital project that we will introduce a bond ordinance for.
okay, so the capital projects are big
Yes.
ticket items, whereas, okay.
Yeah, exactly. The recurring in that sense is more of, every year we have an amount for street, like sidewalk improvements or signs and stuff like that.
If I understand it correctly, are capital items purchases that are depreciated versus expensed?
Well, capital for New Jersey has a life of at least 5 years.
Okay,
And traditionally, we try to have a certain dollar amount more than, a few thousand. In a sense, the items that are captioned cash for recurring capital items, we're almost expensing those items in the current year. Traditionally, they would have been in a bond ordinance, but we're pulling them out and we're paying, they're still in the capital section of the budget, which limits, which has the advantage of being outside of caps and certain other items like that. But in a sense, we're almost treating them as an operating expense.
so a capital item has to have a life of more than 5 years?
Yes, to be considered capital, yes.
And that's a requirement, correct?
Yes, by
Okay.
statute, yeah. And then the next one is the grant statutory expense. That's up $481,144. The largest item included in that is the emergency appropriation for the lifeguards for the 2020 salaries of $335,000. And again, we'll see more of that number as we go through. Social Security costs increase as the salary and wages go up. And then pension costs is up $58,809, which is not related to any of these salary increases. That's just New Jersey's calculation on our liability for pension. So to recap the expenses, we're up $1.3 million. The biggest drivers are the fire department salary and wages, public works salary and wages, I'm sorry.
Wait a minute. I think I just figured something.
We'll give Jennifer a second to catch up.
Okay.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Okay. The fire department salary and wages, $425,000. Public works increase in salary, $267,980. Beach patrol, $65,000 over the amended 2020 amount. Security costs, $83,500. Pension costs, $58,809. And then I list the emergency appropriation last year for $335,000.
Okay,
So that,
part of my education. So
Yeah.
the 335, excuse me. In the prior slide, that's in grants and statutory expenses,
yes,
because you're considering that a statutory expense because we had to get an emergency.
yeah, again, I'm
From the-
going by the official budget document. Technically, it's a deferred charge, but it's in that section of the budget. And I didn't have enough space to write deferred charge. But yes, it's in that section of the last item on that chart. Okay. So that totals 1.2 million of the $1.3 million increase. It's the bulk of it.
Okay, for the budget drivers, the fire department is increased headcount, correct?
Yes, this is the first year of a paid fire department.
Does Public Works have any increase in the head count?
None that I am aware of.
No,
And-
that's in anticipation of the new contract that we're going to have to enter into here shortly.
Okay, and so there's no increase in head count for Public Works? Okay.
No.
And the Beach Patrol, is there any increase in head count for the Beach Patrol?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
So then we look at revenues, and then we're going to go in more detail on a couple of these. Surplus is essentially the same. There was a decrease in local revenues, and then an increase in the local taxes. The local tax levy increase of $2 million. So here I'm trying to break down the reason. The expenditures are up $1.3 million, as we just saw. There was a reduction in local revenues of $267,000. So we had a few of the revenues were hit a little bit by COVID. Parking meters, beach tags, none of them were of a significant amount. They were all slight, but normally we have revenues in excess of what we anticipated, and this year we had less than we anticipated. So under New Jersey budgeting practices, we can't anticipate more than we received the prior year. So that's bringing those numbers down, even though in all reality, we'll have numbers back to where they normally are, which will fund surplus, which we're going to talk about later, because surplus is a little bit lower than normal.
So that overage will fund surplus in next year's budget.
Yes, it'll bring it,
And what was that differential again that we can, I guess, anticipate? So we dropped by
The 267,498?
267. Yep, okay, so one would assume if we enter normal times, we'll add 267 roughly to surplus.
yes,
Maybe even then some, because our original revenue estimate was higher than that.
right. Yeah, so next year we'll be in opposites condition.
Right.
We'll have,
Be the
yeah,
opposite scenario.
yeah.
Okay.
And then there's the $335,000 again to fund the lifeguard salaries, because again, last year we increased the appropriations, but we didn't increase the revenue. It was deferred until the 2021 budget. I don't know what that was.
Neither do I.
So this is the fund balance. So this year, we closed 2020 with $2.5 million in fund balance, and you can see it's down $615,000 from the end of 2020. And again, that was a reduction in the anticipated revenues was the biggest reason for that decline. Normally, we have more money than we anticipate, and this year we had less than we anticipated. We're using approximately the same amount to balance this budget, and it leaves us with $637,000, whereas normally we're between 1.2 and 1.5 million. And again, it's anticipated at the end of 2021, that number will be back where it was at the end of 2020. And some of that money is also sitting in the 2020 budget because of New Jersey budgeting practices. We have a 2-year budget. So the 2020 budget lapsed at the end of 2021. And then we didn't spend the same percentages of the budget we did in 2020 as we did in normal years, 2019. So we have a higher amount in the reserve appropriation reserve, which is the 2020 budget.
How did we, if we didn't budget the 335 last year that we approved for lifeguards,
Right.
how did we pay it? Where did the money come from?
Oddly enough, it becomes a receivable in that it's a deferred charge, so it's either basically they're going to fund it through surplus or through the tax levy.
So, yeah, okay, but for last year then, it would have been the local revenue reduction of 267 plus the 335 would be the difference in your surplus? Because you had a minus 615,000 in your surplus?
I'd have to look into that a little bit further because there's a few more.
Because those numbers kind of,
They
they
do.
add up to,
Yeah, it's not quite that though, because the surplus or the local revenues is down 267, but normally there would have been a plus of maybe this equivalent amount. And then I'll have to see what other factors are involved in the surplus from a traditional year. But the 335 is not per se in that difference. Here's the 2021 Admin and Finance Committee. So the budget, the total administration and finance budget is up 36,000 or 1.16 over last year. There's no significant department changes in any of the budgets that make this up. Overall salaries are down slightly, and it's due to the construction office salaries and wages are down 26,000. And here are some of the functions: council, administration, clerk, engineering, finance, tax collection, tax assessment, planning and zoning boards, legal, construction office, and insurance. And as you can see in the next slide, insurance makes up 56% of the total budget. Insurance employee group was up around 2.5% over prior year, and all other insurance is around 2% increase. Public safety budget. Overall, public safety budget is up $411,000 or 10%. The fire department, here you'll see it's up $324,000, not the $425,000, and that is net of the $100,000 reduction in the fire department OE due to a reduction in the stipends. Police salaries are up $74,300. I believe that's all contractual. Beach patrol and beach tag salary and wages are up $65,000 over the amended 2020 budget. Dispatch and service costs are up $50,000. That is mostly due to not enough being budgeted in the 2020 budget. At the time the budget was put together, the exact cost of the contract with the county was not known. A placeholder was put in, it wasn't quite enough money. Aid to rescue squad is down $100,000, and that is due to the stipends for the fire department. And then the animal control and emergency management other expense are equivalent to last year. And these are some of the areas of public safety: the police, fire, EMS, municipal courts, uniform fire, emergency management, fire hydrant service, beach tags and beach patrol, and animal control. And their budget, 43% of the cost is the police department. The next largest one is the beach patrol and beach taggers, and then fire and EMS at 18%.
So going back to my original question, what was the compensation for the fire department in prior year?
Was that 100, well, it was an aid to rescue squad. I don't think that there was anything to the fire company. We were giving it to, there was that $100,000 was the aid to the rescue squad, which we're not doing any longer. So $100,000.
Yeah, I think there was a slight amount in the fire department OE for some kind of stipend.
There was something, there's another portion in there that was somehow paying the
Oh,
EMTs
yeah.
hourly. The one when they were on an hourly wage. But as far as exactly the money that went to the fire company alone, I don't think you can, I think there's a state statute that only allows X amount of dollars to be paid, correct? And
Yeah.
whatever it was, we did maximize it.
Yeah.
And that is not the 100,000? The aid to the rescue squad, like what Frank is referring to? I know what you mean by the stipends,
Yeah.
but I can't remember the exact number there.
Well, could we
I
have
might be able to find that in last year's budget.
Can we have an analysis of the compensation for last? I don't want to put you on the spot for,
Yeah, that's no problem.
I would like to see the comparison of whatever we paid to the fire department.
Okay. I think I do have one from when earlier in the, last year when we started talking about it. I list all the costs that the department would incur, and then the reduction of the stipends to
Yeah,
all to come up, you know.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I'll dig that out and send it.
Okay.
And then, Public Works. Public Works Department is up $278,700, or almost 13%. Salary and wages makes up the majority of the increase of $267,980. And as you see, the OE and the rest of those departments are up slightly. Buildings and Grounds, $5,700, Public Works OE, $3,700, Solid Waste, $720, Safety Compliance, $600. And those are the areas that make up Public Works: labor pool, solid waste, grounds, special events, safety compliance. And the bulk of the money spent is on Department of Public Works, 58%, solid waste, 33%, Buildings and grounds, 6. Moving on to natural resources. Natural resources decreased $3,715,000. There's $25,000 in their budget associated with maintenance of the bird sanctuary and the point, and there was no increase in that. And these are the areas: beach and bay, back bays, bird sanctuary, beach and dunes, and Stone Harbor Point. You can see there's 25,000 in salary wages, the same as the prior year, and then the OE 65,000 is down slightly. Recreation and tourism, overall increase $43,660 or 10%. Recreation OE increased 4,500. Tourism OE increased 31,810. Overall salary and wages increased $7,350 or 3%. So the bulk of the increase there in the recreation tourism is in tourism OE. And there are the departments that I include. And 52% of the budget is in recreation service and 40% tourism. Moving on to capital, here's some of the capital projects that are contemplated in this year's budget. Stormwater improvements, $7 million. The beach and bay reserves, each of $347,000. And that's funded by cash, not debt. Public works equipment, $276,000. Fire department, SCBA and bottles, $210,000. And that is funded by the cash. Bulkhead replacement, $100,000. Recreation improvements at 82nd Street. Court improvements and field improvements, $66,380. Beach patrol, lifeboat and rescue board, $25,000, and a public works truck, $62,000. And anything with the asterisks at the end is part of that cash for capital projects.
Can I ask, what's the capital improvement to the 82nd Street Court and the field improvements?
I think that well, that's not my area, but I think with that, they talked about resurfacing some of the playing surfaces down there, the tennis courts and whatnot.
So that's
That's just my recollection, I don't know.
is that the capital improvement?
Yeah, I have as recreation, resurface 82nd Street Pavilion Court.
Resurfacing Pavilion Court?
Yeah,
Okay.
and there's some improvements to the ball field,
Ball field?
and then a windscreen for the 96th Street complex.
So the windscreen's capital? And what's done on the ball field that's a capital improvement?
I just have
You just
ball
have an
field.
improvement,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's another reason why kind of we do the cash for capital on some of these things, because they're kind of iffy if they really are capital in the sense of a bond ordinance.
Yeah,
So-
I understand, I've walked that path, yeah.
The water sewer 21 budget. Overall, this budget is up $296,591, or 6.62%. There's an increase in the operating other expense of just $4,730. The Cape May County MUA fee has an increase of $85,000, and the MUA fee represents 34% of the total budget. Here, the debt service did decrease by $113,408. However, we increased the funding of prior capital projects by $223,000. So you'll see that overall debt is up, but it's because of the funding of the prior capital projects. And again, the idea there is to reduce debt service in future years. And we increased capital expenses by $18,000 and salaries increased by $72,000. These are some of the functional areas: sanitary sewer pump stations, water system, maintenance of sanitary sewer pumps, maintenance of the water system, water tower, water wells, collection of the rent. Here's the graph. I'll go into some more detail. We did use $81,592,000 more in surplus to balance the budget, but after adoption, we have $894,000, which is $107,000 more than 2020. So while we're using more surplus, we did not put ourselves in an adverse position. There are the appropriations. So combined, the operating expenses are up $95,715,000. The MUA makes up $85,000 of that. The operating expenses, the other operating expenses are up $47,330 or $4,730, and they include all those things that the borough it takes the borough to run a water system: parts, chemicals, maintenance item, office supplies, insurance, utilities, everything. And then the statutory expenses, FICA, SUI, are up $5,600. Again, debt service on serial bonds are down $113,408, but overall debt is up because of the funding of prior year ordinances by $223,784, and it's classified that way because that's how the budget
Okay.
reflects it. And the salaries are up $72,500.
425.
Here's some of the water sewer capital highlights. Various infrastructure improvements associated with road improvements, $2.3 million. Sewer lift station improvements, $710,000. Well and water plant improvements, $180,000. Fire hydrants, $12,000.
Okay.
And to go back to the current fund, what does this mean to your tax bill? If you have a $2.8 million household, the change in your levy will be a little over $1,000 or $260 and a quarter. If your house is around $1 million, you'll see an increase in your levy by $415 for just the municipal share of your tax bill. If I combine it with estimates from the county, for the county, and the county library, open space, and the school, it doesn't change it all that much. These are just estimated figures for the county, but a $2.8 million house will see a change in their tax bill by $1,180 approximately. And then I just wanted to go back to kind of reconcile the revenues with the tax levy. So the change in the revenues is $2.6 million because, again, the revenues did not have the $335,000 in it that the appropriations had. So that number is higher than the appropriations by $335,000. And this is how we reconcile to get the $2 million change in the tax levy. The local revenues was $296,000 reduction. The other special item was the reduction in the money Avalon paid for the municipal court. And I did the same thing on the appropriations. Again, that number, the $1.3 million is different from the revenues by the $335,000. There's the $725,000 in salary wage increase, slight difference in grants, statutory expenses. The beach patrol special emergency, there's actually a few special emergencies out there. The net change is $332,000. Capital I kind of lumped all together because that is a zero change, and then just general government increased about $121,000.
Jim, can you go back to the
Yes.
previous slide and go through that again for
Yes.
me slowly?
Yeah,
Okay, go
absolutely.
ahead.
So the change in revenue is $1.6 million, which is $335,000 greater than the change in the appropriation because of the special emergency we did last year for lifeguards. This year's budget uses $31,000 more in surplus to balance. We had a reduction in local revenues of $292,000.
Okay,
So we had the budget less, due to actual receiving less. A small change in grants. We anticipated a little bit more in delinquent taxes because the delinquent balance was receivable was a little bit higher than last year. And then there's another section in the budget called other special revenues. And the only difference there was the reduction, Avalon is no longer paying Stone Harbor for
Right.
the court administrator. So that comes up to a net decrease in revenues available of $336,781. So if you add that to the 1.6, you'll get the $2 million increase in the levy.
so is there, and I don't want to belabor the point, I just want to make sure I understand it. If you go back to the slide earlier, current fund revenues, I don't know if you can find that easy,
Yeah,
the one,
it's probably a faster way, but,
okay, yeah, oh,
yeah. This,
yeah, so in layman's terms, then what we're doing is we're making up that, I know there's a few other items in there, like you just explained, but essentially, we're making up that 267 and 335,
correct.
and it's basically going to end up back in our surplus account,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, we're,
Now, and I guess is that driven by some state, I know you said that we can only anticipate revenues the same as we got last year. We can't increase right? So, are we required to maintain a certain surplus level?
not by any state statute.
Uh-huh.
The
Good
danger-
accounting practices, is that?
Well,
what
there's
it
a couple,
is?
there's a couple problems. If it gets too low, one, our bondholders are gonna get upset, or wondering why we're
Okay.
bringing surplus. And also, we need a certain amount of operating cash to, a certain amount of funds to operate. Because, we're responsible for paying the county and the school taxes quarterly, and if there's any slowdown in rent revenue collection, we're gonna, and if there's another emergency.
So it's almost like it's contingency.
Yes.
I mean, it's not there to do O&E with. It's there in case we have like you said, an interruption in income.
Yes,
We have to
yeah.
use it.
And also helps usually
Okay.
stabilize the tax rate, too, from year to year.
Thank you.
Sure.
I looked at the numbers from last year to Frank's question, and it was $205,000 was allocated for the stipends for the fire company. No, 220,000, and 105 was allocated for EMS. So the stipends for the fire company at 220 have disappeared. We're no longer paying the stipends. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. We're no longer paying the stipends because that has now transferred into the salaries for the employees, for the firefighters. So although last year we budgeted $220,000 for stipends in the fire company, we increased that 220 by another 400 for salaries and wages for 24-hour paid coverage, correct?
I'd
Okay.
have to look.
Is that how everybody understands it?
I didn't think, and again, it's like I said to Jennifer about resurfacing, I don't know if I'm 100% right here, but I didn't think the stipends disappeared totally.
EMS.
I thought
Yeah,
this-
but that 220 sum was more than just EMS.
I don't have the sheet in front of me that's the breakdown. The only breakdown I have is 2020.
Right, and really, that doesn't, whatever the end result is, it doesn't change our budget. It's just information so we understand.
Correct,
So-
correct. Right, because Frank wanted to know what happened to that 220 that's causing still the 425 increase. If there's
Right.
still an increase of 425, what happened to the 220? But it's my understanding that's the cost of 24-hour coverage is $600,000.
Judy, I thought that for this year, there was going to be a hybrid and a combination of full-time salary firefighters plus some
Oh, you are correct, because there is still volunteers.
for volunteers and payment of stipends to them.
So the stipend
Continues.
continues at the same rate, 220,000?
That I don't know. I don't
Okay,
know,
that's the, okay,
I think that's the question.
okay.
Shouldn't be, there should be fewer as a result of having full-time firemen.
But I don't know what is actually budgeted for the stipends. I don't have those figures in front of me. I don't have that breakdown.
I'd have to get that.
Okay,
And as part of that, I'd also like to get an understanding as to what the breakdown is with overtime pay.
Yeah.
for,
To the firefighters.
I believe we just got that resolved.
Jim was saying
Yeah.
that there's been some discussion, I guess, this week
Yeah. to
as
make
to
sure-
how that's classified and what the actual amount that would be subject to payment.
Right.
So I think that's one of the open items, is to get a further clarification on how what the expected overtime expense would be.
Yeah, I'll have something early next week on that.
Okay.
Oh, and the budget does include the 30,000 for the museum.
Yes. And which is the purpose of the work session right now, is so we can get these questions out as a group, and then Jim can bring back, and Bob can bring out the answers back to us.
Another general question I have is what we did talk about was, I guess, relating to Public Works, as to whether there's a separate fund, if you will, for unexpected expenses. I think, kind of a buffer, if you will. And I think we talked about, if that was the case, then we would want to pull that out and have it as a separate line item.
We could do that, set up like a contingent line of some sort.
Excuse me?
Set up a contingent line of some sort.
Just a separate line item for, if there's, just to understand what that buffer is,
Yeah.
if there is any.
Well, we'll talk about that, and I guess that gives us enough time at the Public Works section of the next work session, not this Tuesday, the following Tuesday. Because there's a couple items came up out of that Public Works meeting. When did we have that? Tuesday, I guess, that we need to talk about at the work session.
So again, just highlighting, I think we want to address that also, to make sure that we're all on the same understanding with that.
And we can also decide tonight how we want to continue forward with the process. We can set a date when we want to introduce and adopt, and then in the interim, we're going to have to do some more public presentation and get the answers to questions. So right now, we're looking at, would we like to, so we have council on the 16th. We could, starting with the Tuesday, and Jim, let me know if I'm running too late as far as like dates and deadlines. If March 2nd, we could, at that point, be prepared to discuss the 3 workshops that we usually do the first Tuesday, which is A&F, Public Works, and Utilities. And then if on the 16th, we were prepared to do the remaining 3, natural resources, public safety, recreation and tourism. And then if we introduced the budget the first Tuesday in April, are we going too late? So we have to get a tighter timeline. Okay. So let's back up our dates then. Let me see. Can't find February. Stand by. Okay, so again, we're on the 11th. So on the 6th, then, how about if we did the 16th, followed by March 2nd, and introduced on March 16th? We could do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to be prepared with answers for the 3. That's public safety, natural resources, and Beach and Rec. We got to be prepared Tuesday to discuss them in committee and be ready to have decisions made by council. And then 2 weeks later, the remaining 3, and then we would introduce on, what did I say?
The 16th.
The 16th, and we're within good timeline and we're good. Okay. Questions on the timelines? Everybody see, we have to get, there is a timeline that we have to adhere to, and it's one of the reasons why I asked Bob and Jim to have this workshop today, because I could see, I felt like we were running out of time, and it was going to be quite a rush job. So at this point, we can get items up on our website, we can get things on the agenda, we can have the public can weigh in starting in a week then. Information will be out there and moving along. Okay.
So what date do you have for adoption, the 13th or the 20th?
The 16th.
16.
16th would be the introduction. which would make the adoption,
March,
yep,
and then adoption on the 13th?
the 6th. No, right, we got to go, would be,
28 days, John?
28 days, yeah.
So you're going to need 4 weeks.
so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, the 13th of April.
Yeah, so that's the earliest you could do it, because you need 28 between intro and
Okay. And that's when we have count, no, you're correct. So we'll have to push it to the 20th. We don't have council on the 13th, we've got council on the 6th. And the 20th is too late, correct?
Are you okay
No.
with the 20th?
Well,
Starting to get late.
yeah, things get tight then, that's for sure.
Because what's happening here is March has the 5 Tuesdays. And as soon as you throw that 5 weeks in there, it becomes difficult because we're not meeting. So it becomes difficult to get things moving along. So rather than have the 4 weeks, it's going to end up being 5.
I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. I mean, you might want to consider a special in between, because you're really going to be jamming up the schedule. And,
Well-
you know, the 20th is starting to get really late.
It didn't,
Yep.
why can't we, I mean, it didn't take us that long to go through this right now. Why can't we just do all 6 departments at one night?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay,
And quite
Okay.
frankly,
Split 'em
the
up.
lion's share of this increase falls within
Right.
really
Public
3
safety.
committees.
Yeah.
So the discussion, I think, will be limited.
so you want to do that on the 2nd? Is that-
I would do it all in one night and get it done with.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we were to do it all on the 2nd, then we would introduce on what, the 16th?
That's still the same.
Then you're still,
Yeah, you're still,
Still the same.
yeah.
you're still looking at the 13th as a.
That not having that Tuesday in there really throws it off. I mean, having that extra Tuesday really does.
So, 1, 2, 3.
So we're the 11th.
Or what you could do, would you want to do a special on March 9th just for introduction? That gives you the ability to, 1, 2, 3, 4, to adopt the first meeting in April. Does that make sense, Jen?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense, yeah.
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 And that's plenty of notice. That's a month's notice. Mm-hmm. Everybody good with that?
So, March 2nd would be the 6 departments vetting, and then intro the 9th on a special?
Mm-hmm.
March 9, special.
That makes sense because we're just
And
talking about the budget on that special
April
meeting.
6th.
Right.
April 6th adoption. Okay.
Okay, so March 9th. Okay,
That's better than the 20th, for sure.
okay.
If I could just say something. Tonight's budget presentation was a total departure from any budget presentation I've ever seen in the borough, and I really want to commend Jim. This was excellent, and Bob, I am really impressed with your leadership. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you. It's mostly Jim, though, I'll be honest with you.
So before we leave this though, are we all in concurrence with these numbers in this budget?
I don't think that that's necessarily the case.
Okay.
You know, I think that that's what needs to be fleshed out.
It seems, and I'll just say that I have not seen the line by line that we, and we all have that. We all have access to that, and we'll put it on the website. So you have ample opportunity to look at the O&E and all of those items. So what we're basically coming down to is the Beach and Bay contributions are $700,000. The fire is $425, that's $1,125. The beach patrol is the $335?
335, that's from last year.
from last year, but we got to budget it this year, and that's pushing us up towards the 16. So their numbers, that it's my understanding, the only thing within those numbers, and I don't know that we want to do this, the only thing that I see within those numbers would be not to make a Beach and Bay contribution, but I don't know that that's a good idea.
It's not,
So
it's not,
when you look at the other items, we don't have a choice. We have a fire company functioning. We owe the money for the beach patrol. We want to make that contribution. We're going to, whatever we do with it, it seems like it's going to be nickel dime.
You can't unfire the firemen.
Right.
And
And we got to fix that mistake that was made with the lifeguards.
I think
And we're committed to Beach and Bay.
I think I agree with what Bob had said to me a few days ago, that, we can pick through the O&E, but it's going to be nickels and dimes. And
Right.
It's not going to make any difference to the tax rate, or very minimal, let's put it that way. So I guess we just have to bite the bullet, as unpleasant as it is, and forge ahead and hope for a better year next year. I don't want to see that 335 again. I don't want
Right, right.
to see
I
that
don't wanna say it
number
again.
anymore.
Well, we'll have some, again, we'll have some recapture, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I think that's to be anticipated, that we'll have a recapture of surplus, and that's not insignificant.
Yeah.
It's not an insignificant amount. So, the only other question I had is, where is the balance of our Beach and Bay fund right now, after the years we've been putting money aside?
Well, last year was the first year we put a substantial amount in there, 347. I'll have to go check. I know that money's still untouched.
Right.
I think one year we had 50 and the second year was 100, and some of that has been used.
Okay.
But right now, originally it was in a capital ordinance, which was going to make accounting tough. And now it's a separate line in the capital fund budget. So you'll just see it accumulating. And then anytime we want to pull money out, council will do appropriation to pull money out.
Okay.
Do we have an increased contribution over last year's number?
It's very small.
For Beach and Bay, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very small. It's only 2,000, because it's supposed to be
2,000?
0.5%. Yeah.
And what did you say last year's number was?
345.
345?
Yeah.
Okay.
For each.
For each,
For
yeah.
each.
Yeah.
And then this year, 347.
Yep.
Next
We had a projected 10-year plan on this, on building this up, that we started, I want to say 2 years ago. No, maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was 3.
Was it 3 years ago?
I believe so.
Just a reminder, that doubles in '22,
Yeah.
so that's an extra 7 on top of,
So when you say it doubles, you mean it's an extra 1.4?
It's,
yeah, that's one way of looking at it. It's twice the amount that it's being budgeted this year.
Right.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay,
it's
okay.
a built-in penny on the rate next year.
Right, it's an additional 7 over what we're doing this year, but it's going to be, the contribution itself is 1.4.
Yeah.
was that locked in?
There's nothing that's locked in. We laid out, the council at the time, a couple years ago, and I don't remember exactly what year, 3, 4 years ago, we laid out a 10-year plan where the contributions started light, and then they got heavier, and it was every 2 years, maybe 3, where we would then double it like we have been. Because initially it was 50,000. And then it went to 100, like we've been really increasing it, and we had projected 10 years out, knowing full well it was going to cause these kind of increases to taxes.
So we are talking now about when would be the right time for bay dredging. And the earliest it would be the winter of '22, and more likely the winter of '23, based on the accumulated material. But just to put it into perspective, and hopefully, well, I shouldn't say hopefully, it will never, ever be as bad as what it was several years ago with the 10-year buildup. But I think that was, if you were to average it over the 10 years, it's over $1 million a year. Now, I don't want anybody to think that that is the normal rate of disposal, because we were dealing with, for lack of a better word, a mess, and that really drove up the cost. But you got to be careful about, you just have to be careful about how much you're setting aside, because you're going to end up bonding it anyway. So we're going to be having those conversations in the near future about timing. I have asked Mark de Blasio to proceed with permitting because our DEP permit expired back in June. Our Army Corps is good for another 5 years, but we're gearing up, and we'll be having those conversations sometime soon.
Yeah, because we had discussions about getting you an outside, I hate that word expert, but somebody who specializes in this to help you go ahead and make these decisions on what, when, and where we should be.
Yeah.
I don't know where that ever went to.
I-
Are you just going to use McDonald, not
I
McDonald?
can tell you that I had a conference with Lenore and Dr. Farrell last week and Mark de Blasio. And I asked Dr. Farrell point blank, the council's going to have to make a decision, but he felt that he had the technical expertise and competence to make that type of call and to advise the council. And, there's going to be some back and forth. There's going to be
Yeah.
some differences of opinion, and that's a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And then we just, make decisions based on listening to all the experts.
So to your point, Reese, is there any particular thing right now that you would like to discuss? And you seem like maybe there's
Well,
something you feel might be a little more discretionary?
first is just a general question of process,
Okay,
and that has to do with the frequency of assessments. How often are we doing it? How fast are we making changes in assessment? Those questions.
in assessments of what, property values?
Property values.
Well, we don't have Margaret here, but it's my understanding that that is based on your market. You have assessments and reevaluations when the market value starts to exceed or starts to be well below the present assessments. And I don't know, somebody else who knows more.
I'm not an expert, but it's triggered statutorily by the ratio. And so once your assessment dips below a certain percentage of true market, being 100%, and I can't remember if it's 85.
Isn't it 15%?
It's
Yeah,
around
something
that,
around
like
there, yes.
15%. Once it goes below, the ratio will trigger it, or it should trigger it statutorily. But I can tell you, if you were to assume that there was no added assessment by new porches or, improvements, it's really a zero-sum game, because it's all the same pot of money. It's just how you value it. So you're not getting extra money by increased assessments, making it closer to market. You will get extra money if people build additional improvements. That's where the money really comes. And that is an ongoing process. It's not necessarily contingent upon, the overall town-wide reassessment. If that makes sense?
It did, and
Okay.
I'm just thinking in particular with the development of the villa.
Yes, right, that's a good point. Yeah, that will,
So there'll be 13 new homes, that's increased ratables,
yeah.
right there, significant.
And how soon are those new ratables reflected?
At this point, 2.5 to 3 years?
Well, oh, right, you mean in terms of realistic
I mean-
time? As soon-
Like a realistic timeline
Soon
of
as
when we
they're
can
alienated.
expect that?
Well, no, I guess that's the question, is,
I'm going to guess and say the summer of '23.
Right, yeah,
They
2.5
gotta build-
years?
Yeah, no, I think it can be, the road's gonna take 18 months at least, and then you're gonna sell the lots, and they're gonna gear up, so yeah, 2.5 years, I would say. Summer of '23, maybe the winter if you're lucky, spring.
okay.
And
I just wanted to
as-
get an understanding as to how that's, what that process is.
Yeah, because that's not something that we're going to realize in our budget for a couple of years yet. But we do, each year, we realize more in ratables. We do see that each year. As you see, it's the bane of, to some people, but to others, it is the increased ratable. When you see the smaller houses come down and the larger houses come up, it's an increased ratable. And that is something that is just continuing to happen.
That's probably something you'll see in '24.
The villa, you mean, Bob?
I think it might be that late, because
Yeah, I would agree.
Jim said you're not counting current year revenue in your budget, because it's unanticipated. So it probably is going to end up being a '24 revenue item.
Wow, it seems so far away.
I know.
Can I ask a question about how do you work all this in with the limitations of the cap?
We are, this budget is over the appropriation cap and the revenue cap. We are seeking a cap exception with the fire department. The state has not given us a final decision on that yet. The auditor is preparing the official document as they will give us that exception. They've given us every indication that we will get some kind of relief, but they have not given us the final word yet.
So if you get the exception for the fire department, will that be enough to keep you under the cap?
Yeah, that's more than enough.
Okay.
Jim, even with the increases in some other salary and wages, that gives us enough room to stay underneath the cap?
Yeah, as long as we get the exception. I think right now the number's 100,000. We're over the appropriation by 100,000. So we're close, considering all the changes that are in this budget. But, so hopefully they stick to their word and give us the exception.
Anybody else have anything? This is our opportunity. We're all in the same room at the same time.
No, I think, in supporting it, I think one of our, not arguments, but I think we did defer a road program, I believe, for a year. So, that's a step in doing, we actively did something here to try to keep it down by deferring that road program, which usually runs about 2.4 million a year, something like that. A little bit of help.
Okay, so just to recap, March 9th, correct?
Yeah, the
Special
intro March
It's the
9th.
special session, 4:30, and that will actually be a council meeting, not a work session. We'll be taking public input at that time, so we'll make it a budget presentation and a regular council meeting, and we'll do a budget presentation and introduction, correct?
Can I ask just one clarification question? I have continuing negotiations with AFSCME, with Public Works. I know nothing is final until it's actually voted on, but does the council feel comfortable with the, what's being offered in terms of the increase for Public Works? That would be helpful for me to know when I'm continuing my conversations with AFSCME.
Well, my question would be, what does Grant think?
Oh, he's absolutely in favor. He thought what was being proposed was fair, and he felt it would solve some of his problems in terms of recruitment and retention. There was a lot of conversation in A&F, and I think the way Jim budgeted was that we were budgeting a $5 hourly increase from entry level all the way through top title. And so that would give entry level a higher percentage of an increase compared to the top titles. And I think that was the sense I got from A&F, that they wanted to proceed that way instead of just doing a straight across the board increase.
I guess I would have several questions to ask. What is the percentage overall increase?
Is it 13?
It was significant at the lower level, yeah, I think went from 13 to 18.
Well, what she's asking, what I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you she.
That's fine.
But Jennifer's asking, it's 15.6%.
So it's 15.6% overall. Then where do how do our wages line up with other municipalities in the county? How do we compare?
So I did analysis of 3 municipalities. I did Avalon, North Wildwood, and the Crest. And, they're all pretty much, all 4 municipalities are pretty much in line right now.
Okay.
The Crest did tell me that they were getting ready to make, I'm not sure of the word, more than standard increases, significant increases, probably for the same reasons that we're considering it. Reese also asked me to do an analysis with the police department. There always typically is a larger spread between Public Works and police. In this case, I think it was about $5.50 or $6 from entry level in Public Works to, like a Class 1 patrol officer, starting patrol officer. However, we're not just competing against other municipalities, we're really competing against Waste Management. As I said, I saw that advertisement for $22 an hour, up to $22 an hour starting salary for, waste, garbage men, basically. We're competing against Atlantic Electric, PSC&G, the Atlantic City Expressway, private industry. So it's not just, local governments in the area.
And it's also not just salary.
Pardon me?
It's also not just salary. I mean, if you're looking at,
Yeah.
How things stack up, I mean, the whole compensation structure, or the whole amount of compensation, what makes up that total compensation, also is part of, how the comparison.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, overall, public employees have better medical benefits. Depending, there's some argument that pension investment isn't really a great return compared to some of the contributed 401ks. But that's a fair point, that public employees, probably have better benefits.
So what is the benefits at, or when you're doing cost analysis, what do you budget? What's your
Depends-
benefits multiplier?
It depends on the employee, so the multiplier is going to be higher. If you take a $13.50 an hour,
Yes,
in-
but isn't it like 34%?
It really depends, and for the following reason. The percentage is going to be different if you compare an entry level compared to a higher title, because a higher title may pay $27 an hour compared to $13.05. And the medical benefits are flat.
They're
It doesn't matter
fixed,
how much you
yes.
make, although the contributions do kind of level it out a little bit.
See,
So-
I think some of the, I'm sorry, Bob, I cut you.
No, it's, look, if family benefit package, the true cost is what, 33, 34 right now? Single, maybe high teens, low 20s. Parent-child might be, mid to upper 20s. And the contribution really depends on, how much money you're making. If you take the highest of salaries in administration, I think it's like 37%. But if you take an entry level, it might be down closer to 10. I don't really remember, Jen, what the contribution is, but it's,
I
a
think,
lot less.
I think Public Works is an interesting animal too, because you can't, at the lower levels, we're bringing in entry-level people into those kind of positions. A lot of those young men and women, they're looking for the paycheck. They're not looking at, you can tell them they have health benefits, and when they're 21 years old, they don't really care.
They don't
Pension
appreciate it.
benefits. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a double whammy, because he can't recruit, he can't get people to come in at the entry level that's one problem. But then again, when you move up into step 3, 4, like the mechanic problems he had a mechanic he wanted to hire that had certain certifications. The most we could figure out to pay him was $18 an hour. And you can't, like Bob said, when they're paying trash collectors $22 at Waste Management, you just can't, you can't get them. And if you get them, you can't keep them because they're out the door as soon as they find something different. So this will give them a leg up to hold on to the right, recruit the right kind of people, hold on to the right kind of people, and then, 4 years from now, we'll be in the same boat talking about, if it is a 4-year contract, I don't know, maybe it'll be a 3-year contract, but,
So I
Something we have to
understand
do.
that nothing is committed until the budget is voted on, but I think I'm sitting down again with AFSMI soon, like in a week or two, and it would be helpful for me to know, without any commitment to them, of course, which direction the council is going in that regard. That way I can move forward. I think we can wrap that contract up fairly quickly if the council is okay with what's being proposed.
well, I am.
I am too.
Well, any way you look at it, it's a lot of money.
Do we want to wait till we get to the end of the budget process, till we commit?
I would like to say that, look, we got the police the contract that they wanted. We got the firemen the contracts, or the fixed firemen that they wanted. A lot of the salaried employees got nice pay increases that we just went through a couple months ago. And now we're going to get the Public Works, and we're going to try to toe the line on the Public Works employees. I don't think
I don't
that's
think
really,
so either.
that's really a good way to go. Because we count on Public Works as much as we count on the police department.
We did see through COVID how essential they were. They are, and,
So I think.
And what's the alternative?
I think we need to give Bob the authorization to assume that we're good, not assume, but that we're good with that.
Well, Frank, you said what's the alternative? I think potentially an alternative, and I'm not suggesting that this is necessarily the direction we want to go, but potentially an alternative could be to have a wage structure as of day one, and then rather than have the contract that we currently have, I believe, goes up 2% after the first year, right? Is that correct?
We have an expired contract now.
Yeah, no, I mean, the contract that is expired, it starts out at a certain wage,
Yeah.
and then I thought that it went up 2% each subsequent year.
I think the first year it was 2, and then the highest year was 2.75, and there was kind of like a step up over the years. That's my recollection. It might have been like 2, 2.5, 2.75 over 4 years. It's something along those lines.
So a possible suggestion, it would be, rather than necessarily go in at the levels we're talking about here, for the initial year, potentially you could go in at a lower amount, and then year 2, go in a significantly higher amount than the 2% that's in the contract that has expired. But then you would, so they could phase it in differently than a large increase year 1, and then corresponding smaller increases for the subsequent years. So does that make sense?
It does.
yeah, I see where you're going with it, and, I can say with that, if, it's a good idea, and it's an option. So what you're saying is, year 1 is not a significant raise, and we make it up in whatever year 2 would be, because,
I'm not saying actually year 1 will be a significant increase,
but not as,
but not as
Right.
large as
and to catch up in year 2.
catch up in year 2, you catch up and you maybe even,
And the end result, the end of the 4-year contract remains the same.
it would balance out.
So if the end of the 4-year contract remained the same.
I don't know that we, sitting here at 3 arm's length distance from the people who are actually doing the work are qualified to make that judgment. This is where Grant comes in, and his experience with these people, and knowing what the market is. We should be paying attention to what he says.
I don't
think-
disagree.
I think we have, and again, I think paramount here is the fact that we're really competing with the private sector, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And as I'm sure everyone here knows, the cost of acquiring new employees versus retention is much more expensive in the long run. So I'm not happy about any of this either, but the reality is we are up against the private sector, and you want to attract people, and you want to keep good people. It's, in the long run, it pays off. It really does.
And just
So-
tagging on to that, it's a heck of a lot easier to keep people than continuing to retrain new people.
That's exactly right. No, that's exactly what I said. So I think it needs to be attractive from the get-go and incentivize people who stay on board properly. So I think, again, I feel like this has been vetted. I wish I had a better answer, and there was some way but I think that's the reality of,
There is no better answer.
no, there isn't, I agree.
It's reality.
Exactly, I agree. We're not competing against Wildwood Crest, we're not competing against
Right.
Wildwood, any other town, we're competing about the next best option.
Yep.
And there's plenty better options out there right now, I can tell you
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think we're competing against both. I mean, we're competing in a sense against some other neighboring municipalities, and then from a broader sense, we're also competing against private industry.
Sure.
I would say, I would venture to say that the private sector is a bigger competitor to all the municipalities than perhaps a Wildwood Crest. So, in fact, I think you even mentioned,
I mean, anecdotally, that's what I'm hearing. They're not leaving to go to North Wildwood, they're
Right.
leaving to go to.
that's exactly
private
right,
industry.
or any other municipality.
The problem with the private sector is they just don't offer job security.
That's true, too.
I just think Teresa's point, what he's saying is if there's a hefty increase this year, a way of offsetting that is to start later, but at the end of the contract, have the end result.
You tier it in.
And I just say, I see where he's going with it. I think it's a valid point. I mean, I don't think that I'm not saying that it's something that I'm supporting, but I'm saying it's actually something I did not give any thought to.
No.
And it's an option, and it's a valid,
It's something to
I agree,
consider.
it's a valid point. Again, that retention part, I think it needs to be clearly, this program or this negotiation needs to clearly incentivize retention, because we've had a problem with retention. This is clear from what Grant's been experiencing. And as we all know, that retention's important. So to incentivize rather quickly, I think, is important. And again, I think, if the longer we can keep employees, the more efficiently things get done, the less expense we have training new employees on an ongoing basis. It distracts from other work getting done. Again,
It's really the same problem that we've faced with the police department, the same problem
Sure.
that we had with the lifeguards,
sure.
and it's just reality.
I would say it's a slightly bigger problem because I think there's a higher degree of competitiveness in this industry versus law enforcement. So there's certain barriers to entry with,
A lot more mobility.
right, exactly. It's exactly right. So there's an even more highly competitive environment here than in dealing with the law enforcement. So again, I think my goal is to make sure we're competitive and incentivize retention. And I think that's what this accomplishes.
Is there any way, or has anyone ever given any thought to having an independent third party conduct exit interviews with our employees who leave?
No. I'm not saying that's a bad idea. In fact, a lot of times you do get good information, but has there been any discussion or thought? No, there hasn't.
Because I'd be really interested in that data over time.
I know that sometimes when those are conducted, I think some employees, private sector, public sector, wherever, are reluctant to divulge all of the information. I've found that when those are conducted, more general questions can actually be more beneficial than specific answers. So,
I'm looking for
you know, on a scale
general.
of 1 to 10, is wage, how much did wage play into this? Work environment, and then other. So I agree, I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad you brought it up, so perhaps we can,
Can we do that in-house? Well, we don't have to decide that now, but I think
No,
as far as this contract goes, I think, you know, I think it's foolish to try to skimp here and there on this. You know, look what we just spent on what, security cameras? Look what we spent on water meters. These are our people. I mean, we're going to try to, you know, squeeze out $50,000 on this to, you know, we vetted this in A&F, we talked about it, and this is what we kind of agreed to, I thought. This is what Grant's on board with. And it's in the budget numbers work. I mean, I would wish that all of you would support it so that Bob can move forward with these negotiations and not be second guessing.
The fact of the matter is, if you resolve this issue, then you're 95% of the way there. I mean, everything else, you know, we're going to be looking hard at numbers, but you're not going to be picking off anything big with the other stuff, and it's all non-discretionary. So it's really, this is kind of the linchpin to it coming together, if you will. And if you resolve that issue, then we are going to go through it meticulously, but you're not going to be finding anything big. Because we have done that in committee, and Jim and I have sat down, and we sat down with department heads, and we've said, look, we got to be aggressive here.
Well, I don't think it means there's a lack of support. You have the luxury of having been in meetings with Grant, been in meetings in A&F, and been in Public Works. I think people just need, that's why we're here. So Reese can ask the question, and then he can be more comfortable with the decision and the reasons why maybe that's not the course of action we should be taking. I don't think it's a matter of not supporting this, it's a matter of gathering information and being comfortable with the decision. So I think it's just, I don't want you to view it that way, that this is a lack of support. You already have the answers. You had the luxury of more meetings on the topic than others here, so they're just asking the questions. I don't look at it as a lack of support. I mean, yeah, and the reasons why being given why we want to go a certain direction, in your opinion and in Frank's opinion, are being listened to, and Charles, you know, and the reasons why for Charles, and everyone's listening. And hopefully, you know, after being comfortable and hearing your answers, then Bob will have that direction. So I guess we've come full circle. So are you satisfied with the answers that you have been given?
If you want, we can role play. I'll pretend I'm Grant.
No, but I mean, that's the, sometimes with committees, you've got 6 different groups of people talking, and not everybody is privy to every bit of information and every opinion. So it becomes difficult because we're always split up in small groups. And it's great to be like this in the same room at the same time, and everybody hears the same message. We have brought up everybody else. We've brought up the administrative staff. We've brought up, you know, the non-contractual employees. We brought up the lifeguards. We've brought up the police. We have brought up every other department. We've brought up those salaries.
And I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be a significant increase. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just suggesting that potentially look at different alternatives rather than just do one lump sum increase for year one.
Anything, Robin?
I'm just trying to soak it all in, to be honest
Okay.
with you.
So I think.
Just didn't want to exclude you.
I don't want to speak for Reese, but it sounds like he's talking about a significant year one and then graduate it, like, and might be off by the numbers, but year one it's $3, 2 it's $4, 3 it's $5, and 4 it's $5.50 or $6. I think that's what he is proposing or something.
Yeah, I thought that's what I was talking about. That's exactly it, is that, you know, it's spreading it out, the increase over a period of time, and so that you end up very close at the end of the 4 years than you would with going up front year one, a larger increase and significantly smaller increases in subsequent years.
So the question is, you have, you know, that on one side, and then you have, on the other side, let's, you know, jump into the $5 figure. And maybe something in between, but that's the way I'm reading the council, and I've had the opportunity to sit through some of the A&F meetings, and I've listened to the discussion with the 3 A&F members, you know, Reese, Charles, and Ray, and Grant. So I've been, you know, privy to all those conversations, and that's really the essence of what's going on here. There might be some on one side say, let's graduate it, and we're not talking about equal graduation, we'll front load it, compared to let's jump right into the 5. You know, and Grant is going to tell you, by the way, we did talk about a straight across the board percentage increase. And then the committee seemed to think the better way to go about it is like, let's try to bump up entry level, so let's make it a flat rate, so it's going to be a higher percentage at entry level and less for high, you know, the top titles. So really that's,
Exactly.
I don't want to call it a dichotomy, but maybe it's more like a spectrum. And so at some point in time, whether it's tonight or, you know, March 2nd or, you know, the 9th, you know, that's going to be the issue.
I would think that entry level, you're attracting a greater pool of folks with a higher entry level, right? And that's our goal,
Yes. And
Right.
correct?
And re-
Increase, and because it's
And
not only
retention.
retention, but we also want to,
It's entry
You know,
and
we-
retention of entry, yes.
we want to increase our pool where somebody would leave a job to come here, even.
So what happens is, this is kind of like a healthcare term, but it's like velvet handcuffs. You get somebody in the door at a certain wage and they jump up a step or two and they're like, ugh, if I make the move,
I'm not leaving.
you know, it's like, it's just not worth it to make the move after a while. So that's why we thought, let's bump it up high so that we can attract and train and retain. And while at the same time, recognizing that when you have a higher entry, you got to make the rest of it increase. Also as a matter of equity, not just structurally, but as a matter of equity and also retaining them.
I mean, under this program, ultimately, everyone leaves day one with the same extra amount of compensation in their pocket. Percentage-wise, it's less for those who are higher up and have already reached a level of retention where they're comfortable and they're in their employment and being compensated at a higher
Right.
salary. And
Close the bottom. I mean, it's what we try to do at the police department. for the
Absolutely.
same reasons, so.
But I think it would help, too, if you said what exact, like, right now, what's our entry level? It's like $13.50?
I believe it's 13, and then the number was,
So $13.50 an hour is about $26,700 a year.
Yeah.
It's not even a living wage.
No,
No,
it's not. It's not. You
exactly.
can't, if you're single, you can't even rent a small apartment and buy
Right.
your groceries and pay your car insurance to get to work. You just can't do it.
And to have the concrete numbers, so what is proposed?
18.50. Basically, it would be $5, just adding $5 to what the current,
So that's roughly $37,000 a year. So entry level would go from 26 to 37.
and I'm repeating what A&F said. I'm
Yes.
not-
Okay.
That's,
No, I'm just trying to
That's
put it
right.
into, because we're talking about concepts rather than, you know, it makes it, I think, a lot easier to digest when you actually know concrete figures. So right now, $26,000 a year, what's proposed is $37,000 a year.
I mean, quite frankly, I would have loved to have proposed where we just, entry and maybe the beginning tiers are incentivized, and then above and beyond that, leave that go. That's not the way the world works in these negotiations. So there has to be compensation across all levels, and that's why a fixed figure was attractive, because
It
everyone
accomplishes all the goals.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if there was some way in reality to negotiate in a manner that just increases lower tier, entry and lower tier, be all for it, but it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, you gotta push,
Yeah.
push it all up, because, the bottom's gonna overtake, the second or third.
And again, not to minimize what the higher tiers do, because it's valuable, obviously, in its own right. It's just the problem we're experiencing is at the lower tiers. So those are the ones we need to pay the most attention to right now. But I would certainly agree with the higher tiers. They deserve to be compensated additionally as well. In my opinion, the percentages can be differentiated.
I think one consideration is what, if you take a different approach, what are you really going to end up saving over the course of 4 years? You want to shave a little bit here and there, at what expense? I mean, really,
No, and I think if you don't meet a minimum threshold, this will fall flat on its face, because you will still come short of where you need to be. So if you don't come to where you need to be, we'll be right where we are right now.
at the start of the contract.
Right.
3 years or 4 years, whatever it happens to
Right.
be. That's what
We'll be right where we are unless you make the minimum move in those entry tiers to attract and retain.
Yeah.
If you don't, you fall short of the competitive environment, you'll still lose out.
You know what? Being a truck or a diesel or an auto mechanic right now, it's much more sophisticated than what it was 10, 20 years ago. I mean, these kids graduating from these technical schools, and I know this because my wife is a teacher at one. I mean, they're recruited by, the BMW
Mhm.
dealerships. They're making like really good money as 22-year-olds or
Yep.
20-year-olds. I don't know how. I don't know. I don't know how you recruit like good talent in that area at like $22 an hour. I just don't know how you do it. And we don't want to outsource because that's really expensive to outsource that kind of work.
And also, our Public Works employees tend to do everything. They perform so many different functions.
There's a guy that's building an office inside of construction, and the work that he's doing is beautiful. The work that, I mean, you could tell he's a skilled carpenter. And he does taping, and he does spackling, and he does, the whole thing. It's unbelievable.
And then probably ends up being the same person at a special event, 9 o'clock at night in the summer. Like the,
I see him spray paint or spray cleaning, the windows during the summer, so, yeah.
correct. So they
Yeah,
definitely do a myriad of tasks. There's no doubt about that.
I do have a question. If an employee gets a lump sum versus having the pay increase stretch over time, what happens the next year if the lump sum is given? Is there a 2% increase, or does it stay the same?
I don't think there's no lump sums, right? Correct? No, they're not, lump sums are not being, are they?
I think what Robin's asking is, okay, let's say you decide to do 5 in year 1, you do it all at once. What do you do in year 2, 3, 4, and 5? Typically, what has been done over the course of previous contracts is you do the, standard of living, like the 2% or, something along those lines.
They call it like a COLA allowance, cost of living allowance, and that's generally benchmarked right around 2% to keep up with inflation.
I'm hearing you have a consensus to proceed along the line that you're going.
I agree.
I mean, you've got some people that have some concerns and questions, but I think you have the consensus.
And again, I don't mean to seem resolute in what we produced out of A&F, and I know Reese was there for that, but again, and I'm open to, if you want to crunch the numbers, and if you deliver something to me that says, hey, we've raised this where we're competitive and we're attractive and we can retain these people and it's going to fly in the negotiations, I'm all ears. I feel like I've gone through that exercise at least twice in meetings and several times independently on my own. So I feel like we're there, yeah, so in my opinion. But again, I'm all ears. If you got something, I would say, yeah, now, in the next week or two, please.
I have a general sense, and as I said from the very beginning, I'm not going to make a commitment. You know, I'll continue the talk, but once I do get that commitment, I feel that we can wrap it up fairly quickly, and I'd like to do that. I just don't like those stale contracts hanging around too long.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? If not, then only one more thing. Somebody's got to reach out to Martin and make sure he's available on March 9th. So if we can make sure that, because I think it'll be important that we're clear on that presentation. Okay, so, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.